Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Good evening. I am Commander Mike Mooz, but I'm not here as a member of the Royal Canadian Navy, and I'm not here as the Chief of Staff of RMC. I am here, though, to talk about the operational planning process and as a concept for decision making. Planning is very interesting, but at some point you have to stop planning and you have to just go hunting, as these cavemen are talking about. But with the fellow here on the right, what is he actually hunting for? We don't know what he's hunting for. Does he have the right equipment to go for the hunt? We don't know. So that's what planning does. This is the general outline. There is some gratuitous photos in here of ships and some RMC cadets, but that's just to add some interest to the slides. Decision and execution cycle, I'm going to talk about that. My daughter Katrina, as was mentioned, we were sitting at the supper table and she said, "Dad, if you could come and talk about anything, what would you like to talk about?" To her class. And I said, well, I could come in and talk about the decision and execution cycle. And her fork stopped in midstream and she said, "Dad, you can't come and talk about executions." So it's not that kind of execution. It's about how to get plans into action. And so that's the aim. And like the cadets there in the rubber dinghy doing their orientation training, if you don't pull together in planning and what you're going to do after you graduate, when you find yourself having to lead a team, if you have no idea how to lead the team, you're not going to look very good once you in front of your new boss. And once you're going to graduate in May, you're going to find yourself in a new corporation, and you might get the first task as planning the company barbecue or picnic. And you have to sit there and think about how you're going to do that. So if you can't just walk into a room and say, "Hi, my name is," and what do you want to do? You have to go into the room and say, "Hi, my name is," and this is what we're going to do. So that's all this is about. It's just a model. I'm not saying the Navy has it right or the Canadian Armed Forces has it right, but I have traveled quite a bit. I have worked in various places around the world with militaries and civilian agencies, and I found that there is no consistent planning process, and I find that really frustrating when you go and you work with dedicated people around the world in some places, and you walk in and you go, it's great, because these days we know that the military doesn't have the total answer. It has to be a total package with non-government organizations, the Red Cross, other government departments. The military part is actually very easy. But once it's done, what comes next? And that's the part we haven't been very good at. So in some of these instances, to sit there and meet with these people in a group and see what they have drafted, and you go, oh, good, so there's a little bit of an organization here, and you flip the page, oh, there's some phone numbers, contacts, that's great. Flip the page for the plan, and it says, insert plan here. Well, that's, we need to get the plan going, so inserting a plan that doesn't exist is not the way to execute a plan. And so this might be useful. The OODA Loop. Hopefully you've heard of the OODA Loop. It was developed by Colonel Boyd of the United States Air Force during the Korean War. He was a fighter pilot, and he thought of a model that he could use to instruct his pilots. So you can see in the gray circles, starting on the left with number 1, 2, 3, 4, the first thing you do when you're out there is you observe things. You sense things. You see things. You can apply this as you drive home tonight, coming to a red light. So you observe something. But then you have to orient that. What does it mean? You have to make meaning out of it. You have to get knowledge out of what you're talking about, what you see. So you look and you say, okay, so I'm driving home tonight. There's a red light. So I observe a red light. Well, I know that from my training, from my driving, that means I need to step on the brake. I need to stop. So you make that decision, and then you act. So that's the OODA Loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. But as you go around that, you create a cycle, because you don't just stop. You just don't stop at the action. You have to observe your action. Is it working? Is it not working? So it's a cycle. It continues around. And as you continue that around, you come up with an operation tempo. And while you're doing this in the corporate world, or in our case with an adversary, you have to remember that your adversary is doing the same thing. Your adversary is watching you, and they're orientating with their plan based on their doctrine, based on their culture, and they're making decisions, and they're doing actions. So they are doing an OODA loop, just as you're doing an OODA loop, but what happens is you have to be faster. And so this is what's called getting inside your adversary's OODA loop. So right now, for example, you've got Samsung and Apple. They're involved in a little bit of a competition there with iPads and other tablets. So they are observing each other, and they're trying to get inside each other's OODA loop. And one of the fun things you can do is you can do some deception. You could sit there and say, we'll kind of leak it out that maybe we're going to produce, I don't know, an iPad that fits on your watch or something. And we'll make it black and white, and we'll make it huge. It'll be huge, and it'll fit on your wrist. And so then you can trick your adversary that they start putting resources into producing something similar. And then you get inside their OODA loop, and you get more successful. They've wasted a whole bunch of money, and you get going. So what I'm going to talk about now is how to link this OODA loop to the operational planning process. Again, it's just a model that you might use when you go out into the corporate world or into other types of business, or if you're going to plan a TEDx event. So this is the part where the operational planning process comes in. It is the part where you take this orientation, this is your education, this is your training, this is everything you've learned on your course here, and turn it into action. And this is where the operational planning process, it's really this part of the equation. So what is the operational planning process? Again, this is the military side. There's going to be some military jargon, but I mean, that's what I do. So it is an orderly, logical series of steps, and that's the key. It's the function of planning. It's not really the steps of the planning. It's just what do they achieve? What is the function? It's used by our ally partners all the way from Australia all the way to Poland, so it's got to be working. It's a tool that translates strategy, ends, ways, and means. That's always the key. You have your ends, you know what you want as an end state, and you know your means. The means are yourself, your class, your company, and it's the way. How do you link the ends with the means? That's the way. That's the real fun part. But it has to be a unified plan. People have to understand what you're doing, and then it has to be situated in time and space. And the other thing is, once you start the planning process, because you can't do it all at once, you might have to have it over a series of days or months even, but it initiates concurrent activity. So as you're doing this planning, as you're leading this planning, other people are doing work for you because they have tasks from your planning meetings. And when we say it's command-driven, what we're talking about here is making it leadership-driven. You're driving it. They're not driving you. It's cyclical and it's competitive. And it's all part of having an effective battle rhythm. So you have your ops tempo that we talked about earlier, but there's also a battle rhythm in getting the staff to engage in this planning. And if they don't have the right battle rhythm, like these cadets down here trying to do sit-ups with a telephone pole, if you're not in rhythm, then the planning's not going to work, and your picnic isn't going to work out. So quickly, there's 5 steps. Again, these are just general steps. It's all about the function. It's all about a way of thinking about the planning. Well, there's initiation. You have to plan to plan. You can't just, if you're given the task, you got to plan to plan. You can't just get the task from your boss and start running in there. You have to take a few minutes, have a cup of coffee, cup of tea, figure out how you're going to plan to plan. Orientation. Similar to the other orientation, you have to take in factors like your education, company policies, doctrine, what exactly you're trying to achieve. And then you get into the fun part. This is the course of action development. This is linking the ends with the means. Plan development. This is now the tedious part. This is where you have to start writing stuff. It's not the brainstorming stuff, but you have to do that, otherwise you won't get a plan. And then finally, the plan review. Because even though you've launched the plan, you have to see, how is the plan doing? Is it working? Is it not working? And the other thing is, if you're given a task, one of the best things to do is find out who had the task before you and find out what happened. What happened last year's picnic? Did it get rained out? Nobody, we ran out of the organic hamburger. So step one is initiation. Again, this is the planning to plan. You get your task. You get your information, your planning tools. How are you going to do this? You form your planning team. Pretty important. Know who's on the team. What skills do they bring? Assign a plan author. This is the poor person who has to be the scribe, who has to start writing down everything that goes on at these brainstorming meetings. But often that person has a lot of power because they actually write things as they see it. So if they disagree with you, you have to be careful there, because it might not be exactly what you had in mind. And you got to get organized. And then there's the orientation. That's where you're putting together all your skills, everything you've learned, what you know, and you're starting to put it together into identifying the problem. The mission analysis here that we talk about, that is confirming the end state, confirming what the commander, what your boss wants you to achieve, and trying to understand the nature. What is the nature of this task? More staff checks to make sure everybody knows that they're supposed to be at the meeting. Strengths and weaknesses. OP4 means the opposing force. In your case, it'd be your competitor. And of course, your own strengths. Assigning tasks. Always a fun thing. And again, just confirm your own objectives, your end state, and what you really want to achieve at the end of this. And then you develop a mission statement. Your mission statement is basically the 5 W's. St. Lawrence College business class will hold a TEDx on the 28th of January at the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, starting at 7 o'clock. There'll be food, there'll be excellent speakers, there'll be all sorts of keen audience attendees. Then you get into your courses of action, because there's not one course of action. You should come up with different courses of action. And again, that's the fun part. This is where a little bit of your creativity can come into effect. And they can't be outlandish courses of action. They have to be feasible courses of action. Again, more staff checks. Make sure your personnel are doing what they're supposed to do. Again, you develop your courses of action. And every once in a while, you have to make sure that you think about what your adversary is going to do. Winston Churchill once was presented with a strategy by his generals, and he thought, oh, this is a great strategy. What are the Germans going to do? Well, the generals didn't answer that. They said, well, we didn't take that into account. So it's kind of like, well, it's something you have to take into account. Analyze them, war game. Again, that's the fun part. War gaming them, red teaming them, kind of tearing them apart. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? What's going to happen on your picnic if it rains? Do you have an alternate plan? Are you going to move inside? Is there a maintenance shed where you can move the picnic to? Are you just going to cancel it, have it another day? And then you have to present your plan, your decision brief to your boss. And then you select the best option. And then you get into making the plan, writing the plan. And synchronization of the plan is also very important, because this is where your tasks have to be synchronized. Because if you're not in synchronization, then you'll have a misfit. And some pieces can't get done because pieces before it haven't been done. Coordinate the plan, write the plan. Supplemental plan or some annexes. You might want to have a communications plan that supports your plan, a media release. Branch plans, these are plans where if your original plan, you think you're going to have an obstacle, this is a way to go around it. And of course, you have to get your plan approval. And then you issue the plan. You tell the staff, the other members of your corporation, that this is what you're going to do. And you can always update the plan. And then plan review. Again, see what happened in the year before. If you're talking about the company picnic, do a little progress review, make sure it's complete. Exercises and war games, it's always good to test your plan. Revise things as the boss tells you to revise them. And then at the end of it all, you'll get a different kind of caveman. Looks really complicated, but for those who have been in the corporate world, you look at some of these things like, having a meat requirement review, but these things really happen in the business world, just as they happen in the military world. Preliminary hunting review, there's weapon selection, trade study, club versus spear, all those fun things. But in fact, there's a lot of truth in this. Again, applying it to the corporate world. Although my favorite is the chase game down here. Lose game. Chase game, lose game, but get caught by game, choose a new leader. But at the end of it all, is it easier to just go hunting? Of course it's easier to just go hunting, but what does that mean? Does that mean if you don't, what are you hunting for? If your hunting party goes this direction, that direction, rabbits, deer, then it's chaos and you're not going to achieve anything. And remember, you're trying to get ahead of somebody else. You're trying to get inside the OODA Loop. So, in closing, pretty fast, we have a long courses on the operational planning process. But again, this is just to expose you to a way to organize your thoughts, organize your time, and to take charge of things when you are put in front of your new boss and you need to take charge. Here's a way to do that. One of my favorite quotes is the visible world is the invisible organization of energy. It was actually meant to talk about molecular chemistry, but I still like using it because tonight, for example, what we see here, of course, is the invisible part of setting this up, the planning that took place to set this up. And of course, I just have to throw in a little another slide there at the end. But anyways, I have 10 seconds to go. So this was just a model of a way to do planning in whatever task you have ahead of you. Thank you.